Parallel and perpendicular lines. Two lines are parallel if their slopes are equal or the same. And remember, the symbol for parallel is kind of like a slanted 11. And if you have two lines that are parallel, there are arrows put on the lines to show that the two lines are parallel. So if we have slope 1 for line 1, and we have slope 1 for line 2, then those are the same slopes, those are equal, so those lines are going to be parallel because they have the same slope. So let's look at perpendicular lines. Two lines are perpendicular if they meet at a right angle. Remember, the symbol for perpendicular is that, an upside down T. Perpendicular lines have opposite negative reciprocal slopes. When you multiply perpendicular slopes, you get -1. So if one of my slopes for line 1 was 4, and to be perpendicular, it has to be opposite reciprocal. What that means is, if my slope is positive, then my perpendicular slope has to be negative. So I'm going to go ahead and write a negative here. And then reciprocal means that you kind of flip it. So right now it's 4 over 1, so we want 1 over 4. So that would be a perpendicular slope. And if you multiply them, so 4 times -1/4, you should get -1, and you do. So that means that those two lines are perpendicular. So let's test out our skills here. If slope 1 is 3 and slope 2 is 3, those two lines would be parallel. They have the same slope. So that's pretty obvious. Let's look at the next example. If slope 1 was -1/5 and slope 2 was 5, let's test out our thing. Let's multiply these two slopes and see if we get -1. -1 over 5 times 5. That does equal -1. So those two lines would be perpendicular. Okay. Let's look at the next example. We have -1 over 6 for slope 1, and we have 1 over 6 for slope 2. So let's multiply those and see if we get -1. Because they're not the same, so we know that they're not parallel. Because one of them is negative and one's positive. Well, that actually equals -1 over 36, which does not equal -1. So those two slopes actually represent two lines that are not parallel, and they're not perpendicular, so they are neither. Okay, now I have some graphs, and I want to find the slope of my first graph here. So remember, slope is rise over run. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to go up 1, and then I'm going to go to the right 1, 2, 3, 4. So my slope is equal to 1 over 4. So if I wanted a line parallel to that, I would have to have the same slope, 1 over 4. So let's try to draw a line with the same slope. So I'm just going to randomly put a point. I'm going to put a point here, and I'm going to use my slope, 1 over 4, to create my next point so I can draw my line. So 1 over 4. So I go up 1, and then to the right 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? and then I'm going to draw my line. Doesn't go exactly through those points, but if it did, those lines would be parallel. Parallel lines never intersect, so those two lines would never intersect. Let's look at the next graph. I'm going to find my slope. It's rise over run. So I'm going to start at this point, and I'm going to go to this point. So I rise up 1, 2, 3, 4, and I go to the right 2. So my slope is 4 over 2. So if I wanted a perpendicular slope, this simplifies down to 2. So if I wanted a perpendicular slope, my slope would have to be negative. And right now, it's 2, so that's 2 over 1. So to flip it, to do the reciprocal, it would be 1. It'd be 1 over 2. So my perpendicular slope would be negative 1 over 2. So once again, I'm just going to draw a random point here. And I am going to use my slope to come up with another point. Okay, so negative 1 over 2. Or that's the same thing as 1 over negative 2. Doesn't matter where my negative is, as long as it's on one of the numbers. So I'm going to use my second slope so I can stay on the graph. So I'm going to go up 1 and then to the left 2. So that would be my point. And if I drew a line that went through these 2 points, try to line that up a little bit, then those 2 lines create a 90-degree angle, and those 2 lines are perpendicular.